she had to go out. So she's in now. Yeah. You're welcome, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, Dr. Murele. Hello, if you can hear me, please say something. You can use your, okay. You can use your virtual hands to indicate to me that you can hear me. She's trying to connect her audio. She's trying to connect. Please, as you are entering the meeting room, kindly mute yourself. Thank you. So our facilitator is trying to connect her audio. Just patient with her, please.
They want stress your moment.
Good afternoon once again. So we are welcome to today's webinar. This is the 4th edition of the RISE Research to Enterprise webinar, R2E. This is the 4th edition, and we are glad to have you in this session. So while we wait for our facilitator to connect her audio, she's actually in the session now, but her audio is not activated. So I would like us to, I will crave our indulgence to have an overview of Okpolo Global. So a slide will pop up now telling us what we do here in Okpolo. Happy viewing.
Political. Oh, come on, the climate is changing. The climate is changing.
I'm sincerely sorry. I'm sincerely sorry. Our facilitator is still having some issue connecting. Her audio is not connected properly. Just a little patience, I ask of us. My apologies to everyone.
I said, I've got to go because the show.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Is it okay now?
Hello, Ma.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and a very sincere apologies. I had a bit of glitch with my network. I'm so sorry about that.
Thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for your patience. So you are all welcome to the 4th edition of Research to Enterprise webinar series of Apollo Global Innovation Limited. My name is Dr. Agatha Ogbe, and I'm the Research for Innovation in Okpolo Global here. With our facilitator today is Dr. Morile. So I will do a brief intro of who she is. Hello, can you hear me?
Not so well, sorry.
Can you all hear me?
Very well.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I think we're
Thank
hearing
you.
you, Dr.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Thank you. So just a brief intro of Dr. Morele. We've actually spent some time, so I won't take so much of our time. I will give a brief introduction of her, then she will go into the presentation proper. So Dr. Oluwatosin C. Morele, she is the analytic consultant with Team Energy. She's a climate expert, and she has actually done a lot of work within the climate space. A few of it I will just mention here. She contributed to the development of the project that assesses the possibility of housing net zero carbon projects, as well as the development of the mathematical framework that helped Cranfield University on how best to reduce carbon emission within their energy network. So she's not new to this topic, and I believe she's going to do justice to it. Dr. Murray, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you everyone, and good afternoon. I hope I'm not, can you all hear me please?
Yes,
Can
I
you
can hear you.
Can you hear
I can
me?
hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, and can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, 1 minute.
Oh, I can see your screen now, but I can see you, but I thought you're already sharing your screen. I can see you, yeah.
Yeah, can you see my screen? Is it okay? Wow, what's going on?
Are you already sharing your slide?
Yeah, can you see it?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not seeing it.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay. Yeah, share screen. Yeah.
Perfect. I can see your screen now.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. And once again, apologies for the glitch. I'm Oluwatosin Murele. I'm a mechanical engineer. My background is in mechanical engineering, and I'm a sustainability specialist as well. So today we'll be conversing on climate change adaptation strategies. We'll look at the strategies and the payoffs. I want the session to be very engaging, and I've made it to be as simple as possible so that everyone can be engaged in what we're going to discuss today. So firstly, here's my presentation outline. I'll just briefly, we'll look at the context, we'll look at climate change, the causes and effects, we'll look at its mitigation, adaptation and resilience, we'll look at plans, approaches, and strategies. Then we'll talk about the payoffs of climate change adaptation strategies. Our concluding remarks and conversation time. We will all discuss, because climate change we're all in this together, and all hands must be on deck to make sure that we don't contribute more in the negative way to what's already happening, as in to the effects that we already have. from climate change. So here are the global energy facts. There's a 2.3% increase in global energy demand and a 3% increase in power generation from coal. 38% of global electricity generation is from coal-fired power plants, while over 40% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions is from power generations alone. Renewables have a share of just about 26% in global electricity generation. And as such, we have about 79% of the global populace that reside in urban areas. Because of due to all these facts, we need to understand, plan, and take action to protect people, planet, and ultimately the prosperity of human beings. So I'll speak briefly on the causes of climate change and its effect. So starting from climate change, the major cause of climate change is anthropogenic emissions. And these are emissions that are caused by human activities. Fossil fuels, that's looking at coal, oil, and gas as well, have a significant input in causing climate change. From what we discussed, from what I just spoke about earlier, in urban areas, expansions are taking places, while in rural areas, shrinkages are happening. And what I mean by this is that people are moving, so many people are moving out of rural communities into urban communities worldwide. And this is stimulated by economic growth and increased populations. This eventually causes pressure to applicable land use change, and there's also pressure on existing green infrastructure resources. All of these effects are detrimental to the impact on adaptive capacity. So here are some facts. Over 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions is caused by fossil fuels. And this also constitutes 90% of all CO2 emissions. Annually, an estimated 12 million hectares of forest are destroyed. Now we'll look at the causes of climate change. If I'm too fast, please slow me down. I talk a bit fast during presentation, but
Okay.
please feel free to slow me down. Yeah?
Okay, a little bit louder because some of the participants can't hear you.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Let me adjust my volume then.
All right.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Hello?
Okay, yeah. You're okay, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
Thank
we'll
you.
just look briefly at causes of climate change. Firstly, we look at power generation. We'll look at electricity and heat. We'll look at manufacturing of goods, such as plastics, because most of these come from petroleum sources. We'll look at deforestation, that's cutting down of trees in a layman's term. Look at agriculture and other land use changes. Transportation also accounts for about 25% of global energy-related CO2 emissions. Food production, packaging, and distribution. Here we're looking at the machinery that are used for food production and packaging and distribution. Most of this machinery use fossil fuels as a sources of energy to power them. And all of this produce carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases. In building electrification, the heating of buildings and cooling of buildings, they also come with their own associated carbon dioxide emissions. And again, overconsumption of food, clothing, electronics, and plastics contribute significantly to climate change. Now, we'll look at the effects of climate change. And one of the first of it is temperature increase. Climate change causes global warming. When the atmosphere is warmed, definitely temperature all around will increase, and then it causes increased severe storms as well. How this increased severe storms is caused is that once temperature increases, there is an increase in evaporation and also condensation as well, which causes lots of rainfall and flooding. There's increased drought as well. Water becomes more scarce in some regions. Ocean rise with warm temperature. There's loss of species that live in oceans. Once the temperature is too once the ocean temperature is too high for them, some of them may not be able to survive the increased temperature. A lot of this increased temperature as well causes forest fires. There's severe weather, extremes of weather. It's either it's too cold that we're all seeing now, or it's too hot. And then there's always invasive pests and diseases. And what I mean by this is diseases that are really difficult to control. Some are actually associated with temperature increase. And this leads to risk in our health as well. It causes insufficient food. And how it causes insufficient food? Once there's deforestation, there will be low land, little space of land to plant crops, as in crops that are edible. And then once there is forest fires, wildfires, some crops may actually get damage as well, and then it leads to poverty and displacement in areas where there's tornadoes, typhoons, cyclones, like what recently happened in Buffalo in America. You see a lot of people being displaced from their homes, and we should not even go too far. Even in Nigeria, just recently this year as well, there's been some issues in the eastern part of the country that have been faced with floods. All of these are just severe effects of climate change. Now, we'll look at climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. When we talk about climate change mitigation, we're looking at the strategies that are utilized to reduce climate change, which are caused by greenhouse gases. These greenhouse gases are just gases that trap the heat from the sun and eventually warms up the atmosphere. And now it's been stated that the atmosphere to avoid catastrophic effects on the atmosphere, and for all of us that reside that are still here, then the temperature must not go beyond, it must not go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But the way it is, if drastic changes are not made, then we're actually going to go beyond that, above that temperature, and it will be catastrophic to all. Climate change adaptation is simply the ability to cope with the impact of climate change. This adaptation helps citizens, communities, and regions to better understand, prepare for, and manage climate risk. And when we're talking about climate risk, we're looking at heat waves, forest fires, drought, floods, storms, and diseases, while climate change resilience deals with the anticipation, preparation, and actions that are actually taken in response to dangerous climate-related occurrences. Looking at mitigation and adaptation, they are intertwined. Let me put it this way. For mitigation, like I stated earlier on, it's just actions that are taken to reduce emissions that cause climate change, while adaptation is actually living with the immediate and even anticipated effects of the impacts that caused by this climate change. So when we look at mitigation, we're looking at sustainable transportation. By sustainable transportation, we're looking at transportation that uses less of fossil fuels now, looking at transportation that use less of petrol, looking at electric vehicles and zero carbon vehicles as well. Not only road transportation, but even aircraft, even ship transportation in the oceans as well. Everything is all involved in this. We're looking at energy efficiency. What ways can the energy that we consume, can we be sure that they're efficient? Here we'll be looking at using more renewable energies and changing our behaviors as well, because behaviors actually come in place as well in being energy efficient. And then we'll be looking at clean energy. For adaptation, we'll look at disaster. We can look at disaster management and business continuity, infrastructure upgrades, flood protection, while intertwining on both mitigation and adaptation. There could be new energy systems, education, as this is part of what we're having today, water conservation and natural environment. Now, are the approaches and strategies to climate change adaptation? We can look at the use of energy efficient renewable energy sources to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Also, adaptation efforts should be increased. There should be realistic actions on climate-proofing, resilience building, prevention, and preparedness. It's been stated from the last conference of parties that was held in Cairo, the last one, COP27, that was held in Egypt. It was actually brought to the notice of everyone present that there's little importance, well, not importance, less is being spoken about on adaptation strategies, but more on mitigation strategies. And efforts have been made to make sure that there's enough funds that go into adaptation strategies and adaptive measures as well. There should be development, test, and upscale of innovative and cost-effective zero carbon solutions through research and innovation. We cannot underestimate the place of research and innovations in all of this. But then if there's research and innovations and there are no off-takers for them, and what I mean by off-takers, the technologies won't just sit on the shelf like that, but through sensitization, such as this webinar that we're having, then everyone will be able to embrace technologies that are renewable, that are energy efficient, and that could be classified as zero carbon technologies. There should be restoration of ecosystem, seagrasses, mangroves, and salt marshes. They should be restored. And what we're talking about here is there should be less of deforestation that happens. All those practices should be reduced because trees, like we all know, they're storehouses of carbon dioxide. They are carbon sinks. And once these trees are cut down, then there'll be carbon emissions that will actually be released into the atmosphere. And this carbon emissions causes greenhouse gases effect because carbon dioxide stays for so long in the, we can term it as a long-lived gas because it stays for centuries in the atmosphere. It accumulates there and it continues to stay there. And it's staying there for a very long period of time is catastrophic to the environment. Also, there should be we should engage in approaches in food system. And what I mean by food system here is looking at nutrition and dietary changes. We should eat less of red meat, as it's been said, and then we should be very sustainable in what we eat as well. And in all of these, we will be able to demonstrate strong climate resiliency. In rounding off, we'll look at the payoffs on climate change adaptation strategies. Firstly, climate change adaptation lowers future losses and damages. Once we're able to adapt to the effects of climate change and we're adapting very well to it, then there'll be future losses and damages. It generates benefits for economies. And what this means is, let's say, for example, once there are extreme weather conditions for people that work on the field, if they're not adapted to that, then they may not be able to go to their workplaces. But if there has been some adaptive measures that have been uptaken by those people, then they will be able to, go to their daily chores and carry on their daily activities. There'll be risk reduction, increase in productivity, improvement in social and environmental benefits. And also, part of the payoff is it promotes innovations. In conclusion, we'll look at economic benefits of climate change adaptation. And part of this economic benefit is there will be sustained agricultural production, higher household income, and part of the environmental benefits will be enhanced environmental services. decrease vulnerability to extreme weather conditions. There'll be social benefits as well. And lastly, I'll say if there are financial incentives from government, if there are improvements in energy efficiency policies, if government introduce renewables in new buildings and awareness creations to individuals through webinars that we're having, such as these esteemed organization has put together, the internet and social media platforms are also some ways that will enhance climate change adaptation and also sustain climate change resiliency. Thank you for listening. I hope I wasn't too fast, and it's time to engage.
Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you. Thank you. I will just love to do a brief recap for those that might have joined in late. So we actually, from your presentation, is a discussion on climate change adaptation strategy and payoffs. And you've mentioned the causes of climate change. We'll be hearing this climate change, what actually causes it. And from your presentation, human activities are one of the major cause of climate change. In a bid for us to make a living for ourselves, at the same time, we expose ourselves to activities that will harm our environment, and is also affecting the climate around the climate. Human activities have also urban migration to the urban centers and bringing about urbanization. Lots of things are being brought down, development, industries coming up is increasing the effect we have on the climate, and the rural area shrinking of people there because a lot of out migration is actually taking place there. Then fossil fuel burning, we have power generation and food production through our agricultural activities is also increasing the climate change. Then effect of this climate change in us, we have the increase in temperature, forest fire. I know there are some countries around the world that once in a while in a year they experience bushfires that just come up like that. It's usually common around Australia, New Zealand area. So it's a bit of climate variations that cause these happenings. We have a severe weather, health risk, insufficient food, and the poverty and the displacement as we experienced in Nigeria last year. Then the mitigation, we're able to separate the mitigation and adaptation for us. And for mitigation, what are those activities that we actually do to reduce climate change? And the adaptation, as you actually explained, are the things that we on our own do to adjust, to cope within with the effect of climate change. And there's a kind of a nexus that you brought in, what we do to mitigate and how we adapt to it. And there's a link between the two of them. And in that one, you mentioned water conservation and other things. So for adaptation, you mentioned climate proofing, we mentioned resilient building, prevention, preparedness. How well do we prepare for this? Like the flooding that happened last year, September, thereabout, we weren't, as a country, we were not prepared for it. And so many people were actually displaced from their homes. Then what are the payoffs? We do things to have a benefit. So when we adapt, what are the payoffs we tend to get from it? As you mentioned, lowers future losses and damage. So our activities let me take it from the agri sector, our activities, cultivation, then now we are not trying to adapt to it. We now adopt climate smart agriculture to be able to adapt to climate change and try to modify our activities. It lowers our future losses. So if I now adapt climate smart agriculture, I will be able to lower the losses of my produce. And for those that produce crops, I'll be able to lower that. And it will also increase my income and improve my production. And you mentioned promoting of innovation. So many things with the issue of climate change, people are actually thinking how do I improve this? What is my contribution? Where do I key into? How do I key into the space? And ideas are actually coming up, and innovation are built in this area. So yes, there's a payoff in that. So the economic impact, a benefit from it, sustainable agriculture, as I mentioned earlier, and the enhancement within our environment. So I believe I was able to run through that for those that joined late to catch up with what we have actually discussed so far. So the floor is open for anyone that wants to ask question. There's a hand raised now. Samuel Ido, your virtual hand is raised. You can proceed with your question.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thank you for that beautiful presentation. And my question has to do with the issue of strategy, and it is equally linked with mitigation. Sincerely, I was expecting a pro-poor form of strategies, because poverty is one of the fundamental reasons why we are contributing significantly to climate change, especially in Africa. If you look at the trend of things in Nigeria now, the price of kerosene has gone up beyond the reach of the common people in Nigeria. And Nigeria is signatory to the Paris Agreement and so many other agreements on climate change. How do we resolve this climate issue when poverty is on the increase? And the strategies that are in place now are not really pro-poor in Africa. With this in place, do you think there will be any possible solution in sight? Again, what is the difference between clean energy and renewable energy? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Samuel. Dr. Morele, do you mind responding to it, or you take them down? Then you respond later. You are muted. You are muted, please. Okay.
Yeah, okay, so let me just quickly, Samuel's first question, if I got your question well, thanks for those questions. Your first question is on poverty as in how will adaptive measures be applicable to us? Let me just pull people from developing countries now, because they usually associate us with poverty, but you cannot blame people that do that. Let's say we are a bit, and on the energy side, we may have a bit of poverty in energy, with so much epilepsy in our electricity supply. So from one of the concluding remarks I stated, I've actually mentioned here the financial incentives from government will go a very long way. So if that can be pushed, looking at the poverty side of it now, if that can actually be pushed forward and it's realistically implemented, then it will go a very long way. Then again, I will say it's not all adaptive measures that involve spending of money. At times, just some behavioral changes, simple behavioral changes that the cost is so low or that has even no cost associated with it is part of what I can say we can actually look at. So it's not all of those measures that have high cost associated with them. Then for renewable energy and clean energy, well, I'm not sure. Well, what I'll just simply say now is it's not all renewable energy. Renewable energy are meant to be clean, but it is not all renewable energy that we can say it's clean. There are some people that have actually argued on biomass now. We know biomass is renewable, it's a source of renewable energy. But some people will still argue that there are still some carbon emissions that are attributed to biomass, to the logistics of moving biomass. Now, let me put it this way, from one point, from its point of production to where it's going to be used. I hope you're getting me very well. So for biomass now, fine, it's meant to be a renewable energy source, but some people still talk about the field, that is the vehicles, the trucks that are used to move these biomass material sources to their point of usage, to their point of consumption, that those trucks are actually being filled by fossil fuels. So in that case, there's still a bit in logistics, in biomass supply chain networks now, there's still a bit of carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, that is involved in transporting the biomass from its point of production from its point of harvest to where it's being used. So I'll say all renewable energy might not be clean energy, but once it's a clean energy, then we should know that it's renewable. So it's just simply, let me just put it that way. I hope you're clear on that, Samuel.
Okay. Okay, I believe he is. So I will take the next question in the order the virtual hands are raised. So I'm going to call on Longinus Nadozie. Please, you may ask your question. You can mute yourself and speak. Nadozie. Okay. Perhaps he's no more connected. Okay, let me call on Professor Okogwe. Okay, noted, Nadozie. Professor Okogwe, sir. Okay, Nadozie, you can speak now. Okay, sorry. Prof, good afternoon, sir. Prof, you are muted. Okay. The host, you can speak, sir. But can I hear him?
All right. So that's what happened with Nadozie. The host has muted everybody. So when you call somebody, you unmute the person from that.
Noted,
Maybe
noted,
if you can still give Nadozie the chance, since he was earlier, unmute him and let him speak.
Sure, I will. Once you are done, sir, I will.
Oh, okay. When I'm done. Right. I want to appreciate the presenter for a work beautifully done. And before I ask my question, I would like to tell the audience, the others, that, well, these are general things. Like we did, the first one was generally on mitigation, and this is generally on adaptation. And then we will now take the various sectors one by one later. Smart agriculture, smart building, and health, that relates to health, and so on. So you may not expect the presenter today to cover all the areas. So that will be done sector by sector, agricultural sector, energy sector, and so on in subsequent webinars. But let me ask this question. When it comes to flooding, forest fire, for instance, we don't have much of that, but we have flooding. What are the coping strategies individuals can, because I expected that we should have in coping strategies what belongs to government, what belongs to individuals, so that, for instance, if there is flooding that happened in Turkey, even where the former number one citizen's house was engulfed, what can he do, or what should he have done that he didn't do? I think that's I like the the speaker to address this. What is it that belongs to the individuals in terms of coping or adaptive strategies, and what belongs to government? That's the only thing I want to ask.
Okay. Ma, you may react to the question, please. Can you unmute her, please? You can unmute. The host has disabled that. You can unmute, ma. You are muted. You can unmute, ma. I can't hear you.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. It took a while before the thank you, Prof, for your question. I'll just quickly deviate a bit. To answer your question, I'll speak on how we as individuals, because mitigation and adaptation, I can say they work, they're not same things, but they work hand in hand. So I'll say how we can mitigate. I'll just quickly mention how we can mitigate flood now that you just spoke about. One of the ways, we may not be able to do that completely, but one of the ways that can be done is we should keep our drainages free. We should not block drainages. Once drainages are not blocked, then will be some percentage sure that there may not be flood may not happen. But let me now talk about adapting to flood, as in if I look at the flood as an occurrence, as in if it's, let me say, an occurrence that one doesn't have control over now. I'm looking at it on another side. How do we adapt to flood? If we're prepared, as in if we know the times of definitely during the dry season, there will not be flood. But if we're prepared that during the rainy season, there will be flood, and that's talking about preparedness now. Adapting to it is we move away. We can migrate from those flood-prone areas to areas, as in areas that are very close to the coastlines, people residing there prior to the raining seasons. They can actually migrate. I'm using Nigeria as an example now. They can actually move from those areas to areas that will be less affected with flood. But before that can even happen, before people can move, considering the type of, considering our country, then financial incentives from governments will still have to come into play. And what I mean by this is, if government agencies have actually identified the areas, so all of this work hand in hand now. They've actually identified areas that have highly prone, that have a very high, they're highly prone to being flooded when the rains come. Then they can actually make provisions for people living in those areas to move to areas that will be less prone to flood. Thank you.
Professor, you want to add something? Okay. So I will call on Longines Nadozie. So you might check if you can unmute yourself now. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
If I'm audible enough, can you hear me?
Fair enough, but it's a bit low.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I had to pull up the road so I could attend this webinar. I was actually on the road when I was prompted. Thank you for the presentation. I listened from where I joined, and from all the chaos that the presenter has been able to put forward, I have a concern. Down here in Africa, actually in Nigeria, where our agriculture is still rain-fed and heavily dependent on climate conditions, and we are unable to control quite a good number of them. At the rural level, where the farmers who do not even believe that there is anything called climate change, Their only concern, their only worry is that they see that their crops no longer do well. They see that there's too much heat or there's too much water outpour, rainfall, and then it affects their yield. What else? I don't know. I actually got to learn about your presentation this afternoon. I didn't know there was a kind of initiative like this. But then, how, like Prof was asking, mitigation and adaptation, whether we can separate them into those that government can do and those that individuals can do. And I'm focusing on that second part of it. How can individual farmers, what do we do? There is this reluctance by the farmers to even believe that there's anything called climate change. They are reluctant to believe that. So when you get to them and you're trying to make them see, look, if you do this, this will happen to your crops, or your crops will behave in certain ways and all that. They're telling you, no, we're used to this. Our forefathers were doing it this way. It's been a tradition. We've been doing this for decades. Why do we have to change now? Do you have any kind of advocacy that targets the rural farmers? I am talking of people at the basic unit of level of production, so that we don't end up, there are many of us who are lettered, we can understand, we can read, we can write, we understand when a presentation is made. To break this presentation down to the level where the farmer who is not so much educated as we are, I mean Western education now, that can understand what we're talking about. How do we come in? Because that is where the issue lies. You see, all these things you're talking about, carbon emission and all that, to them, they don't understand it. But when it pains them is when their crops, their farming activities are affected. And that is where you now find them being like, this year I was able to put in this amount of effort and I got less than I would have gotten, or I got 5 years or 10 years ago. I don't know if my question is understood. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Maria, to this.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I'll take it in two dimensions. And the first thing I'll say is just looking at the farmers now, we're talking about carbon emissions, mitigation, adaptation, resiliency, and they're like, can somebody tell me what that means? Now, coming down to that level, the first thing I'll say is there can be sensitization at the grassroots level. Not even speaking of all of this English that we're talking about here, all these big words that a lot of them might not even really be interested in. And sensitization that I mean at the grassroots level, firstly, there can be sensitization on land use change. The farmers can actually be sensitized and made them understand that they can actually grow their crops and also rear their livestock on the same parcel or on the same piece of land. And what this does is it reduces the hectares of land or the expands the area of land that is actually used for grazing of animals, because we know that grazing animals as well leads to, it's part of, when we're talking about deforestation, we can bring it as a subtopic as well under deforestation. And even grazing animals as well, these animals, they'll graze on the land, they will defecate on the land. There'll be methane as well that be released into the atmosphere. So coming to those farmers level, where they can be sensitized on land use change, as in using a smaller area of land to still achieve same thing. And what I've just mentioned is they can actually rear the animals and grow their crops as well on same piece of land. There'll be benefits to that as well, because once those animals are being reared, the expanse of land that'll be used will be lot more less than if they were to, rear animals on one space of land and then grow their crops on another one again. That's one. And even the animals' droppings can serve as manure, again, fertilizers for those farmers. And then secondly, if government should give increased powers to these farmers, to these villagers, as in let them have a bit of power over their lands in the areas, then you find that it's been actually researched that a lot of these rural communities, once they have control over their lands, they themselves even prevent deforestation. So firstly, I've mentioned land use change. There should be smaller expanse of land an expanse of land should be used for varieties that I've just mentioned, growing of crops and rearing livestock on same plot of land. And then again, there should be increased power given to these rural farmers as regards the lands in the communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add to, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to add to this statement that to the question that was asked. Yeah, we in this part of the world, our agricultural activity is actually dependent on rainfall, and it is when the rain comes that we actually plant. And several situations have actually occurred when there are early rains, and when the farmer plants, before you know it, we have this period of drought that then our crops are actually gone, and they have to resupply again and be able to make up. So in that situation, a lot actually need to be done in this climate space, because many farmers really do not actually understand what is going on. So I am speaking from experience from a survey that was in February last year that I participated in Abeokuta, and the farmers, when we mention the issue of climate change, have you experienced? You're like, we believe our forefathers were angry with us, we need to do things. It was funny. I was like, okay, forefathers, what's the relation of forefather? Perhaps they were angry. Say, what did you not do? We had to do some things, and the rain came again. So they believe they actually did some sacrifice, and rain came for them, and it was funny. But that calls for actions, because now we know that there's a problem. So we actually need a kind of a capacity building to an awareness to enlighten them. The weather is what 10 years before now is not the same again. Things are changing, and part of the things that are changing, we are contributing to it. Our activities are contributing to it. I will let them know the activities that we do that exposes us to these experiences, and what we need to do now to retrace our step back and do things better. So more of awareness in those locations in the rural areas, and be able to collaborate with organizations or social societies, civil societies that are into that space to be able to get through to these farmers. So that's what I want to add to it. And I know Prof was actually raising his virtual hand. I believe he wanted to say something. Prof, sir.
Okay, the other time you refused to unmute me. So now you have done that. Right. When the question of what can an individual do with regards to flooding, I wanted to add to the fact that which Login actually brought up, the fact that people build on floodplains unknowingly, and government also approve their buildings. And when you have water, will always take its natural course. When you put your building where is the root of water, because water must move when there's rain. So, but again, we're talking about relocating, and some people also, because of the cultural mentality that this is my father's house, this is my ancestors' building. We've gone to a conference where people present papers, NGOs, that when you go to ask people to relocate, they refuse. And or maybe go to IDP camps and things like that. This is where, like Longinus was saying, we need NGOs that will go back to the rural communities. And when there's a flood alert, maybe a forecast, NAMET will always give a forecast and even name states that are likely to have flooding. Then the government would have to partner with the NGOs to go to the rural communities, especially the flood-prone areas, and also downscale these alerts to their level. The same thing with actions or climate smart agricultural practices, where they have their way of doing it. If you say there's going to be more rain this year, or Agatha was talking about that where our agriculture is rain-fed. And in being rain-fed, there could be little dry spells that will come at a time that it didn't come last year. It didn't come 2 years ago. It didn't come 3 years ago. And it will cause serious damage to crops. So what's the NGOs and these agricultural extension workers who have also been enabled to understand the climate science, the level of explaining it to the farmers is important. And that's why the Apollo group, those who are here, we're talking about town hall meetings. We're talking about, getting people to understand, because a lot of things we're talking about is grammar. Yeah. Like the presenter also recognized. It's grammar. They don't understand this grammar. You must downscale this grammar to their level, and then the NGOs and for agriculture, it is the those in extension work that can do that. But they also need to be trained. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for adding that. Professor OA, your virtual hand is up. Please ask your question. Okay.
Have you unmuted him?
Yeah, he's unmuted, sir. He can speak. Professor OA. I said, okay, Dr. OA, you can speak. He's unmuted. He muted himself again. Okay. Okay, let me call on Dr. Olanike.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Murele. You've really done a great part on explanation on the climate change and the payoff, especially getting us to understand the adaptation, the mitigation, and the resilience. And mine is just a contribution to this. I would say there is need for us to engage the government, the stakeholders like the government, the NGOs, research organization, the private sector, just like we are doing, in getting people to have understanding about climate change. And taking, for instance, like the issue of the farmer now. A farmer that doesn't know what is climate change or anything, but he knows there are changes to the crops and the output of those crops. So such a farmer will need education, smart agricultural practices, awareness, capacity building, and many more. So there is need for government intervention in all these things. And I would say for us in Okpolo, we have several programs in which we have listed out for the year on awareness program, on education, capacity building, stakeholders engagements for the governments, just like they are trying, we are having politicians trying to go for preparing for the next election, this year election. What are their plans on climate change? What do they have to offer? So that's where the stakeholders engagement will come in, the research for universities and individuals, the town hall meetings and the panel discussion and many more. So I would say for us that have all joined this Zoom meeting, I will encourage us to be at alert as all these programs rolls out, and to encourage others to participate in these programs of Okpolo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Olanike. Thank you. I have Oluwafemi Boyeje. I hope I got it correctly. You can speak now.
All right. Can you hear me? Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. And can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned a lot of things, and one of the things you mentioned was around incentives and how, I mean, in previous slide, you mentioned something around government providing incentives for people, probably NGOs, for example, we educate these people about the, probably, for example, the effects of flooding or potential flooding alerts, and then get them to a safe place or something around that. But I would say it's more of a question, but more around, are we looking at the possibility of leveraging decentralized organization, what we call DAO, the blockchain space, in addressing some of these issues or in preparation for climate change adaptation, where we have organizations like NGOs and other players coming together to like address some of these issues that were stated here, and also probably a new kind of financial system to drive incentives. Are we looking into that, or do we have probably organizations here or persons here, or probably in Africa also looking in that particular direction? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me speak to this. So just like Dr. Olanike mentioned earlier before I called you, Okpolo Global is actually rolling out an initiative within the climate space, and it's not just on us. The climate issue is a contribution from everyone. So it's going to be an involvement of stakeholders. So be it a private organization or even from the government or civil societies, people that will come together, people of like minds in this space of climate, and work together to be able to actualize that. So I will not let the whole cat out of the bag now. So programs in this area would definitely be rolling out as the year comes, and just stay tuned to it, there are more of it. And this is just a beginning to the climate discussion we'll be having here in Okpolo. We had one last month in December. This is the second one. The one of last month was more on mitigation. Now we are talking about adaptation, and several will be coming. So I will implore you to stay tuned. And if you are within the space to partner with and be a stakeholder engagement, you could drop your email address. We'll reach out to you. I'll also type my email address here. You could send an email to me, and we'll start the conversation from that area.
Dr. Olanike and Co, can I add this too? Please.
Yes, sir, you can, sir.
From what has been said, we might have to double up in identifying and bringing on board NGOs that have inclination to these climate change issues. So let's just bring them to our webinars. Remember last webinar, it was also stressed that their role is very crucial. So let's invite many of them to this meeting. And if anyone is on call here who knows any of these NGOs, please do well to let the Apollo group know these NGOs. And the things that we are rolling out, there are some that will be made available to people in the short run. So let's be on alert in that regard. But Agatha, please, and Olanike, please, let's try and harness more NGO people to come on board. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, I just dropped my email address on the chat box,
Yeah.
research@okpolo.global. You can reach me there. And Olanike, Dr. Olanike, kindly drop your email address so you can be reached also. Do I have a hand up here? Dr. OA, your virtual hand is still up. Okay, while we wait for him or Hannah. Oh, okay, you can speak now, please. You're muted again. Okay, let me call on Ibinka Fuwakbe. Please, ma, pardon me. I hope I got it. Ibinka Fuwakbe. Please, ma, you have the floor.
Can you unmute her, please?
Yeah, she's unmuted from the host. Yeah.
Yeah, you have just unmuted me.
Okay.
Yeah, I joined others to thank the speaker, even though I joined late. At the point I really wanted to make, Professor Okogwe just made it. But for sake of emphasis, let me just say it. When this last flooding took place in Nigeria, do you know that even educated people, that is when it dawned on the educated ones that the issue of climate change is real. When you talk about climate change, people will say, oh, there isn't really anything about it. But when this flooding displaced universities, so many people, and I think it affected, if not almost all the 36 states in Nigeria. But the South states were worse for it. That is when it became really obvious to people in power and even educated folks that climate change is real. And what I want to say is that I know that agencies like NIMET and maybe some others, but NIMET in particular, do make forecasts of what the weather outlook is going to be. But the issue is how many people take it into consideration. I mean, even educated people. Now talk less about people in the rural places. And the point now is we need people, not necessarily government agencies, but NGOs or other stakeholders who can interpret this data to the farmers, people generally that need the information. And the way it has to be, I mean, these things have to be interpreted in languages that people in the villages can understand and act on. You know, in developed countries, because they have weather that changes rapidly, you dare not go out of your house if you don't, read about the weather. You want to know, even on your phone, you want to know what the weather outlook is like. before you go out. And we need to begin to do things like that in Nigeria. Now, the issue of NGOs, there are so many NGOs working on environment and all of that. We need to know what NGOs are doing, because you may just assume, oh, the NGOs are doing this, and you may be surprised that maybe they are not even doing what you think they ought to be doing. So that's why I also agree and support the idea that NGOs can be invited to this webinar, and let's have some of them talk to us. Let's know what they are doing, because we might have some areas where we expect NGOs to cover and they are not covering it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. So just like Professor Kubwe said, we'll work on that and have them onboarded to our webinar session as well. Dr. O.A., can you speak now?
Yeah, my hand is up if you can hear me.
Yes, I can. You can speak, sir.
Okay, lovely. Dr. Morele, thank you so much. That was short, but very impactful, straight to the point. Thank you so much. The question I want to ask is there any study, perhaps on a kind of graduated incidence of pain points? That is to say, what say across the geopolitical zones, what it is exactly that people across various lifestyles, whether they are farmers, whether they are people living in the urban areas or rural areas, how painful the effect of climate change has been affecting them in a documented fashion, such that if you want to carry out some level of advocacy, you are a bit more pointed in addressing the most painful, the most severe incidents of pain. I say this because Nigerians and resilience, especially in the area of suffering, it's like 5 and 6. It has become almost cultural for people to become inured to pain and suffering. And because it becomes cultural, culture will eat strategy for lunch any day. So any strategy that you want to deploy towards advocacy to assuaging those pain points, it must be driven by data. The point I'm trying to make again in this is that because these people are also used to behaving in a certain way, they will not change unless you give them a very good reason. Not even temporary pain will do that. In fact, elsewhere, behavior change is usually funded, typically by government and a little by NGOs. If this does not happen, if funding does not happen for advocacy towards behavior change, lives and property will continue to be lost. So I ask again, is there any kind of survey, any kind of reliable data that gives us some level of pain incidents graduated along the lines of severity of such pains by geopolitical zones? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so Dr. Agatha.
Yes, please.
Can I just make a comment on that?
You're free, sir.
There are different researches going on in different, climate change has become an issue that most sectors are interested. Even newspapers. For instance, when there is flooding, it's so much all over the place that the information is everywhere. But like you are saying, is there any documented? I believe that the Ministry of Environment, not I believe, the Ministry of Environment, the federal one has such. Then every state has also a Ministry of Environment and has a climate change policy and documentation, and they have that. I know in Ondo State, I know we have in Ondo States such documented evidences and all of that. But the issue you are raising now, Dr. Owe, is the issue of funding, funding to get this disseminated. Like was said even by Professor Fuakwe, you discover that even those who the NGOs themselves, many are not, let me say, not trained, and that's why we need to bring them on board. And in Ministry of Environment, when they have their programs, we also ask that those agricultural extension agents, how to use climate data, climate information, and they'll scale it to understanding of the farmers and persuade them. That's what it takes, because they will resist it, but you persuade them. But when they have one experience, one bad experience, they'll look for you. For instance, there are places where people have planted on floodplains and things like that, and the flood came and carried all their, farm plants. Some of them are already produced and things like that. So the thing is that we have NGOs, and NGOs actually are non-governmental, so they seek their fund. So and one of the webinars that we may have also is the issue of financing, the climate financing, and where to source for funds. And then the NGOs can also be invited into that webinar, and that will make things a little more clear. Their role is very, very crucial. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Prof. Ma, you want to say something? Professor Ibiyinka. Okay. Thank you, Ma. Thank you so much, our facilitator today, Dr. Oluwatosin Morele. It's a pleasure having you with us today. I know I've actually taken much of your time for this session. Thank you so much. I want to appreciate all our participants for this webinar session, and we are really grateful here at Okpolo Global having you to be in this session today. And before I let you off, I want to implore you to always follow us on our social media platform. In all our social media platform, our handle is at okpolo.global. On LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Yeah. So follow us on at okpolo.global for every information and notification on all of our webinars. You can also follow, from there you can check our website as well. Thank you so much, thank you so much, thank you so much. So from us here at Okpolo, we want to say thank you and wish you a blessed weekend. Bye from here.